The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand halls of Buckingham Palace as King Charles III made his way to his private study. His footsteps echoed against the marble floors, each step carrying the weight of a decision that would soon send shockwaves through the royal family. The king had been awake since dawn, his mind racing with thoughts of the announcement he was about to make. Queen Camilla was in the garden, tending to her beloved roses, completely unaware of what her husband was planning. She hummed softly to herself, enjoying the peaceful morning routine that had become her sanctuary since becoming queen consort. The fragrant blooms seemed to dance in the gentle breeze, and for a moment all felt right in her world. Meanwhile, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was preparing for what she thought would be a routine morning of royal duties. She stood before her mirror, adjusting her elegant blue dress while her lady-in-waiting briefed her on the day's schedule. Kate had no idea that this particular Tuesday would mark a turning point in her royal journey. The king's private secretary, Sir Edward Thornbury, knocked gently on the study door before entering. His face was grave as he carried a leather portfolio containing the documents that would soon change everything. Charles looked up from his desk, where he had been reviewing the final details of his surprise announcement. "Your Majesty," Sir Edward began carefully, "are you certain about this decision? The timing might be considered quite sudden by some members of the family." The king nodded solemnly, his weathered hands clasping together as he considered the weight of his choice. "Sometimes, Edward, the crown requires us to make decisions that others may not immediately understand," Charles replied, his voice carrying the authority of his position. "Catherine has proven herself time and again. This honor is long overdue." The palace staff had noticed an unusual energy in the air that morning. Whispers traveled through the corridors like wildfire, though none of them knew the exact nature of what was about to unfold. The head butler, Mrs. Morrison, had observed the king's unusually early morning meetings and the way certain staff members had been sworn to secrecy about upcoming arrangements. As the clock struck 10, King Charles made the call that would set everything in motion. His voice was steady as he spoke to his communications team, giving them the green light to prepare for an immediate press release. The honor he was about to bestow upon Kate was unprecedented in recent royal history, and he knew it would create waves throughout the monarchy. Queen Camilla finished her morning in the garden and made her way back toward the palace, still humming contentedly. She waved to a few staff members who bowed respectfully as she passed. Her schedule included a meeting with her husband at 11, where she expected to discuss their upcoming joint engagement in Scotland. She had no inkling that this meeting would instead deliver news that would leave her speechless. The Princess of Wales completed her morning preparations and stepped into her waiting car. As they drove through the London streets toward her first engagement, Kate gazed out the window at the crowds of people going about their daily lives. She wondered, as she often did, about the responsibility that came with her position and how she could continue to serve the people of Britain with dignity and grace. Back at the palace, King Charles stood at the window of his study, looking out at the sprawling grounds where his family had walked for generations. The decision he had made was not taken lightly. He thought about the future of the monarchy and how Catherine had consistently demonstrated the qualities needed to carry the royal family forward into a new era. The morning air was thick with anticipation, though most of the royal household remained unaware of the storm that was about to break. In just a few hours, the carefully maintained balance of royal hierarchy would shift dramatically, and Queen Camilla would discover that her position as the most honored woman in the royal family was about to change forever. The news broke like thunder across the media landscape at exactly 11:30 that morning. Royal correspondents scrambled to their phones and computers as the official palace statement appeared on their screens. The announcement was brief but earth-shattering. King Charles III had bestowed upon Catherine, Princess of Wales, the ancient and revered title of Duchess of Cornwall, a title that had been exclusively Queen Camilla's domain for nearly 2 decades. Television newsrooms erupted into controlled chaos as producers shouted instructions and reporters frantically gathered information. The BBC interrupted regular programming with a breaking news bulletin, while social media platforms exploded with reactions from royal watchers around the world. The hashtag #JarRoyalSurprise began trending within minutes. Queen Camilla was in the middle of reviewing flower arrangements for an upcoming charity gala when her private secretary, Lady Patricia Hamilton, burst through the door with an expression of pure shock. "Your Majesty," she stammered, her usual composure completely shattered. "You need to see this immediately." She thrust a tablet toward the Queen, her hands visibly trembling. Camilla's eyes scanned the official palace statement and the color drained from her face. The tablet slipped slightly in her hands as she read the words that would change everything. "His Majesty the King is pleased to announce that Her Royal Highness Catherine, Princess of Wales, has been honored with the title of Duchess of Cornwall in recognition of her outstanding service to the Crown and the people of the United Kingdom." Meanwhile, Catherine herself was completely unaware of the announcement as she visited a children's hospital in central London. She moved gracefully from room to room, speaking with young patients and their families, her genuine warmth lighting up each encounter. The hospital staff noticed nothing unusual, though several of them kept checking their phones with increasingly bewildered expressions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the hospital's chief pediatrician, was the first to receive a call from her assistant about the royal news. She glanced across the ward at Catherine, who was currently reading a story to a group of children, and wondered how to process this information. Should she mention it? Should she wait? The princess seemed so natural and at ease, completely focused on the children around her. Back at the palace, King Charles was preparing for what he knew would be a difficult conversation with his wife. He understood that Camilla would feel blindsided by his decision, but he also believed that the monarchy needed to evolve. Catherine represented the future, and this honor was his way of acknowledging her growing importance within the royal family. The king's decision had not been made lightly or in haste. For months he had been considering how to formally recognize Catherine's contributions to the crown. Her work with early childhood development, mental health awareness, and her natural ability to connect with people from all walks of life had not gone unnoticed. The Duchess of Cornwall title, steeped in centuries of history, seemed like the perfect way to honor her service. Queen Camilla set down the tablet and walked to the window, her mind reeling from the implications of what she had just read. The title of Duchess of Cornwall had been hers since her marriage to Charles, long before he became king. It represented her identity within the royal family and her connection to the duchy that had been so important to Charles throughout his life as Prince of Wales. Lady Patricia watched nervously as her mistress processed the news. She had served the royal family for over 15 years and had never seen such a dramatic shift in protocol without prior warning. The implications were staggering, not just for Queen Camilla personally, but for the entire structure of royal precedence and tradition. The phones at Clarence House began ringing incessantly as journalists, royal experts, and members of parliament sought comment on this unprecedented move. The staff, caught completely off guard, could only refer callers to the official palace statement while they scrambled to understand the situation themselves. As Catherine concluded her hospital visit, she noticed her protection officer receiving what appeared to be an urgent phone call. He stepped away discreetly, but she could see the tension in his posture. When he returned, his expression was carefully neutral, though she detected a hint of something unusual in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said quietly as they prepared to leave, "your private secretary has requested that you return to Kensington Palace as soon as possible. There's been an important development." Catherine nodded, though a flutter of concern crossed her face. Important developments in royal life could mean many things, and not all of them were pleasant. The drive back to Kensington Palace seemed longer than usual. Catherine found herself watching the London streets with growing unease, noticing that several people on the sidewalks were looking at their phones and then glancing toward her car, with expressions of surprise and excitement. Something significant had clearly happened, and she was apparently at the center of it. Catherine arrived at Kensington Palace to find her staff in a state of barely controlled excitement. Her private secretary, James Whitmore, was waiting at the entrance with a mixture of joy and apprehension written across his face. As she stepped out of her car, she could see several members of her team gathered in the main hallway, their expressions ranging from delight to concern. "Your Royal Highness," James began as she approached, "congratulations are in order. His Majesty has made a most extraordinary announcement." He handed her a printed copy of the palace statement, watching carefully as her eyes moved across the page. Catherine's steps slowed, then stopped completely as she absorbed the words. Duchess of Cornwall, she whispered, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. She looked up at James, her green eyes wide with shock. But that's Queen Camilla's title. How is this possible? The weight of what this meant began to settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. James cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, it appears that His Majesty has decided to share this historic title. The palace statement indicates that you will hold the title concurrently with Her Majesty the Queen. It's unprecedented, but entirely within the King's prerogative to grant. Catherine sank into a nearby chair, her mind racing with the implications. She thought about Queen Camilla, who had held this title with pride for so many years. How must she be feeling right now? Catherine had always been careful to respect the established hierarchy within the royal family, and this sudden elevation felt both thrilling and terrifying. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla was pacing in her private sitting room, her earlier shock having transformed into something much more intense. She had called for an immediate meeting with her husband, and the minutes felt like hours as she waited for him to arrive. Her hands shook slightly as she poured herself a cup of tea, a ritual that usually calmed her but now provided little comfort. The Queen's mind was flooded with memories of her journey to this position. She thought about the years of criticism she had endured, the slow process of gaining public acceptance, and the pride she had felt when she finally became Queen Consort. The Duchess of Cornwall title had been her anchor through it all, representing her special connection to Charles and her role in his life. King Charles finally arrived at Camilla's sitting room, his face grave but determined. He had spent the past hour fielding calls from various royal household officials, all expressing their surprise and concern about the announcement. Some had questioned the wisdom of making such a significant change without consultation, while others worried about the potential family tensions it might create. Charles, Camilla began, her voice carefully controlled but trembling with emotion. How could you make such a decision without discussing it with me first? This title has been mine for nearly 20 years. It represents everything I've worked for, everything I've endured. Her usual composure was cracking, revealing the hurt and anger beneath. The king moved toward his wife, his hands outstretched in a gesture of reconciliation. My dear, this doesn't diminish your importance or your role. Catherine has proven herself to be an exceptional member of our family. This honor recognizes her contributions and prepares her for an even greater role in the future of the monarchy. But why this title? Camilla demanded, her voice rising despite her efforts to maintain royal dignity. Why the one title that has been uniquely mine? There are dozens of other honors you could have bestowed upon her. This feels like a deliberate slight, a message that my years of service are somehow less valuable than hers. Charles sighed deeply, understanding his wife's pain but standing firm in his decision. The Duchy of Cornwall represents the future heir's connection to the people and the land. Catherine is William's wife, and one day she will be queen. This title helps establish that connection now, while she can grow into it alongside William. Back at Kensington Palace, Catherine was on the phone with her husband, William, who was currently on an engagement in Birmingham. His voice carried a mixture of pride and concern as they discussed the unexpected development. "Kate, you deserve this recognition," he said warmly, though she could hear the underlying tension. "But I know this must be difficult for Camilla. We need to handle this situation very carefully." Catherine nodded even though he couldn't see her. "I never asked for this, William. I worry about how this affects the family dynamics. Your father should have prepared everyone for this announcement." She paused, then added quietly, "I keep thinking about how I would feel if someone suddenly shared a title that I considered uniquely mine." The palace staff were struggling to manage the flood of media inquiries and public reactions. Social media was ablaze with opinions ranging from celebration to outrage. Royal supporters were divided. Some praised the king's recognition of Catherine's work, while others criticized what they saw as an insult to Queen Camilla. Emma Thompson, a royal correspondent for The Times, was frantically trying to reach palace sources for additional information. "This is either a brilliant strategic move or a catastrophic family miscalculation," she told her editor during a hurried phone call. "The timing suggests this was planned, but the reactions suggest no one else was prepared for it." As evening approached, the full magnitude of King Charles's decision was becoming clear to everyone involved. What had begun as a gesture of honor and recognition had erupted into a family crisis that threatened to overshadow the positive intentions behind it. The palace walls seemed to echo with tension as three of the most important figures in the British monarchy grappled with a situation that would test their relationships and their commitment to the crown. The tension within the royal family reached a boiling point as evening descended upon the palace. Queen Camilla had retreated to her private quarters, refusing to attend the planned dinner with foreign dignitaries. Her absence sent ripples of concern throughout the household staff, who were accustomed to her unwavering dedication to royal duties. Regardless of personal circumstances, Lady Patricia Hamilton found herself in the impossible position of making excuses for the Queen's sudden indisposition while fielding increasingly urgent calls from the King's office. The Foreign Minister of Belgium was scheduled to dine with the royal family, and protocol demanded that both the King and Queen be present for such an important diplomatic occasion. "Tell His Majesty that I am unwell," Camilla instructed her secretary, her voice hollow with exhaustion and hurt. "I cannot sit through a formal dinner and pretend that everything is normal when my entire world has been turned upside down without warning." She stood at her window, looking out at the palace gardens where she had found such peace that very morning. King Charles found himself facing a crisis he had not anticipated. His good intentions had created a diplomatic nightmare, with the Belgian delegation expecting a full royal reception and his wife refusing to participate. Sir Edward approached him cautiously with updates from the media, where speculation about a royal rift was beginning to dominate the news cycle. "Your Majesty," Sir Edward reported quietly, "the press office is receiving inquiries about Her Majesty's absence from tonight's dinner. There are already rumors circulating about a family disagreement." The King's jaw tightened as he realized how quickly his private family matter was becoming a public relations disaster. Meanwhile, Catherine was struggling with her own emotions as she prepared for what would now be an incredibly awkward evening. She had spoken with her stylist about wearing something understated and respectful, hoping to avoid any appearance of celebrating while Queen Camilla was clearly distressed. Every choice felt loaded with significance. Prince William arrived at Kensington Palace just as Catherine was putting the finishing touches on her appearance. His face was grim as he embraced his wife, both of them understanding that they were walking into a minefield. "Father called," he said quietly. "Camilla won't be joining us tonight. This is worse than we thought." The Belgian delegation arrived at Buckingham Palace expecting the usual pomp and ceremony that accompanied state dinners. Ambassador Laurent Delacroix noticed immediately that only King Charles was present to greet them, though protocol typically required both monarchs to participate in such welcomes. His trained diplomatic eye caught the subtle signs of tension among the palace staff. During the pre-dinner reception, Catherine and William arrived to find King Charles putting on a brave face for their international guests. However, the absence of Queen Camilla cast a shadow over the entire event. The Belgian minister's wife, Madame Delacroix, quietly asked Catherine about the Queen's health, clearly sensing that something significant was amiss. "Her Majesty is feeling slightly unwell this evening," Catherine replied diplomatically, though her discomfort was evident to anyone who knew her well. She felt like she was playing a role in a drama she never auditioned for, trying to maintain royal dignity while her heart ached for the family conflict her honor had caused. As dinner was served in the grand state dining room, the conversation was stilted and formal. King Charles made valiant efforts to engage his guests in discussions about trade relations and cultural exchanges, but the magnificent room felt strangely empty without Queen Camilla's warm presence. The Belgian delegation, though too polite to comment, clearly noticed the unusual dynamics. Upstairs, Queen Camilla sat alone in her sitting room, picking at a simple meal brought by her lady-in-waiting. The sounds of the dinner party below drifted up through the palace floors, reminding her of the duties she was abandoning for the first time in her royal career. The weight of her decision to absent herself was almost as heavy as the hurt that had prompted it. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends and family members who had seen the news. Some offered congratulations to Catherine, not realizing the family turmoil the announcement had created. Others expressed confusion about the sudden change in royal protocol. Each message felt like another small cut to her already wounded pride. Charles found himself making excuses throughout the dinner for his wife's absence, weaving a careful narrative about a sudden onset of flu symptoms. The Belgian ambassador, a seasoned diplomat, accepted these explanations gracefully, while privately noting the obvious tension for his later reports to Brussels. Catherine barely touched her food, her stomach churning with anxiety and guilt. She caught William's eye several times across the table, both of them communicating their shared concern without words. The honor that should have been a celebration had become a source of family division, and she wondered if there was any way to repair the damage that had been done. As the evening wore on, palace staff whispered among themselves about the unprecedented situation. Never in recent memory had a queen consort refused to attend a state dinner for personal reasons. The head butler, Mrs. Morrison, found herself constantly glancing toward the stairs, half expecting Queen Camilla to appear and restore normalcy to the evening. The dinner finally concluded with the traditional toasts and exchanges of gifts, but the usual warmth and genuine hospitality that characterized royal entertaining was notably absent. King Charles's smile never quite reached his eyes, and Catherine's gracious responses to the Belgian delegation's compliments about her new title felt forced and uncomfortable. As the guests departed, the true cost of the king's surprise announcement was becoming clear. What was meant to honor Catherine had instead created a rift that threatened to damage not only family relationships, but also the monarchy's reputation for unity and stability. The morning after the disastrous state dinner brought no relief to the royal household. Newspaper headlines screamed across front pages worldwide, with photos comparing Queen Camilla's absence to various royal scandals of the past. Palace in Crisis dominated the Daily Mail, while The Guardian ran a thoughtful analysis titled, "The Crown's Delicate Balance, Tradition versus Modernization." Catherine woke to find her phone buzzing incessantly with calls from her mother, Carol Middleton, who had seen the coverage and was deeply concerned about her daughter being caught in the middle of what appeared to be a royal family war. "Darling," Carol's voice was tight with worry, "perhaps you should consider declining this title until things settle down. Your reputation is more important than any honor." Queen Camilla had spent a sleepless night alternating between anger and deep sadness. She had served the royal family faithfully for decades, enduring public criticism and slowly earning respect and affection from the British people. The idea that her most cherished title could be shared without consultation felt like a betrayal of everything she had sacrificed. At dawn, she made a decision that shocked even her closest advisors. Queen Camilla called an emergency meeting with her private secretary and announced her intention to temporarily withdraw from all public engagements. "I need time to process this situation," she declared, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil she was experiencing. "I cannot perform my duties effectively while feeling so unsettled." King Charles learned of his wife's decision through Sir Edward, who delivered the news with obvious reluctance. The king's face grew pale as he realized the implications. Queen consort withdrawing from public duties was unprecedented in modern times, and would inevitably fuel speculation about the stability of the royal marriage and the monarchy itself. "She cannot be serious," Charles muttered, though deep down he understood his wife's pain. He had genuinely believed that sharing the title would be seen as an honor to both women, a way of acknowledging Catherine's growing importance while maintaining Camilla's established position. The reality was proving far more complicated than he had anticipated. Public opinion was sharply divided, as revealed by social media trends and opinion polls conducted by major news organizations. Younger demographics largely supported Catherine receiving additional recognition, viewing it as a natural progression given her popularity and effective royal work. Older royal watchers, however, saw it as a slight against Queen Camilla and a dangerous precedent that undermined traditional protocols. Catherine decided to take matters into her own hands. Against the advice of her staff, she requested a private meeting with Queen Camilla. When Camilla's secretary initially declined on behalf of the Queen, Catherine made an unprecedented direct call to Camilla's personal phone, a move that bypassed all royal protocols but demonstrated her genuine concern for the family situation. "Your Majesty," Catherine said when Camilla answered, her voice humble and sincere, "I know I'm breaking protocol by calling directly, but I couldn't bear the thought of this situation continuing without us speaking honestly. Would you be willing to meet with me privately? I think we need to talk woman to woman, not just as members of the royal family." The request surprised Camilla, who had expected Catherine to either celebrate her new honor or at least maintain the formal distance that royal protocol typically required during family disagreements. The genuine emotion in Catherine's voice touched something in Camilla's heart, though she remained guarded. "Very well," Camilla replied after a long pause. "Come to Clarence House this afternoon. But this is not an official meeting and I want no staff present. Just the two of us." Her tone was cool but not completely closed off, giving Catherine a glimmer of hope that they might find a way forward. Meanwhile, Prince William was dealing with his own challenges as he tried to support both his wife and his stepmother, while managing his father's increasingly erratic decision-making. He arranged to meet with King Charles privately, hoping to help his father understand the full scope of the crisis he had created. "Father," William said during their meeting in the king's private study, "I understand your desire to honor Catherine, and she deserves recognition for her work. But the way this was handled has created unnecessary pain and confusion. Camilla has been loyal to our family for years, and she deserved to be consulted about something that affects her so directly." Charles looked older than his years as he listened to his son's words. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier than it did in that moment. "I thought I was doing something positive," he admitted quietly. "I wanted to acknowledge Catherine's contributions and prepare her for her future role. I never intended to hurt Camilla. The palace communications team was working overtime to manage the media storm. Official statements spoke of family, discussions, and ongoing developments, but royal correspondents could smell a major story and were digging deeper into the implications of Queen Camilla's sudden absence from public view. Royal biographer Sarah Bradford received multiple calls from publishers interested in a rush book about the current crisis. "This is either going to be remembered as a brilliant strategic move that modernized the monarchy," she told a colleague, "or as the moment when King Charles's reign began to unravel. There's very little middle ground here." As afternoon approached and Catherine prepared for her meeting with Queen Camilla, she felt the weight of trying to heal a wound she had never intended to create. The honor that was meant to recognize her service had instead become a test of her ability to navigate the complex personal relationships that lay at the heart of the modern monarchy. The British public watched with fascination as their royal family faced its most significant internal crisis in years. Social media buzzed with speculation about what would happen next, while bookmakers began taking odds on whether Queen Camilla would resume her duties or if Catherine would ultimately decline the controversial title. Catherine arrived at Clarence House that afternoon with her heart pounding and her mind racing with everything she wanted to say. She had chosen to drive herself, dismissing her security detail to the nearby perimeter, wanting this meeting to feel as personal and informal as possible. The grand entrance that had once seemed welcoming now felt intimidating, as she prepared for what might be the most important conversation of her royal career. Queen Camilla waited in her private sitting room, having changed from her formal day clothes into a simple cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearls. She had spent hours preparing for this meeting, mentally rehearsing the points she wanted to make while trying to calm the storm of emotions that had been building since yesterday morning. When Catherine was shown into the room, both women stood for a moment in awkward silence. The usual royal protocol seemed inappropriate for the raw honesty this conversation required. Finally, Catherine took a deep breath and spoke first. "Your Majesty, I want you to know that I had absolutely no knowledge of His Majesty's intention to share this title with me," Catherine began, her voice clear but filled with emotion. "I learned about it the same way you did, through the media, and I was completely shocked. This is not something I requested or even imagined." Camilla gestured for Catherine to sit, her expression softening slightly at the younger woman's obvious sincerity. "Please call me Camilla for this conversation. We're speaking as family members now, not as formal representatives of the crown." She poured tea for both of them, her hands steadier now than they had been in over 24 hours. "Camilla," Catherine continued, accepting the tea gratefully, "I know how much the Duchess of Cornwall title means to you. I've watched you carry it with such dignity and pride over the years. The thought that my receiving this honor has caused you pain makes me feel physically sick. That was never my intention, and it's not what I want." The Queen studied Catherine's face carefully, looking for any sign of insincerity or political calculation. What she saw instead was genuine distress and a young woman struggling with an impossible situation. "Catherine, I believe you," she said quietly. But you must understand how this feels from my perspective. This title represented my journey from being seen as an outsider to becoming an accepted member of this family. Sharing it feels like a judgment that my years of service aren't enough. Catherine leaned forward, her eyes filling with tears she had been holding back since the announcement. Your years of service are more than enough. You've been an incredible queen consort, and you've supported the king through everything. I've always admired how you handle the pressures of this role with such grace. I would never want to diminish that. Then what do you propose we do? Camilla asked, her tone becoming more practical as she saw Catherine's genuine emotion. The announcement has been made. The world is watching to see how this family handles internal conflict. We can't simply pretend this didn't happen. Catherine had been thinking about this question since her phone call the previous day. I've been considering asking His Majesty to retract the title. I don't need another honor to do my job effectively. The recognition I value most is seeing the positive impact of our work, not collecting titles. Camilla was surprised by this suggestion. She had expected Catherine to defend her right to the title, or to propose some kind of compromise that would allow her to keep it. The willingness to give up such a prestigious honor spoke to Catherine's character in a way that formal protocols never could. That's very generous of you, Catherine, but it might not be the right solution, Camilla said after considering the implications. Retracting a royal honor would create its own scandal and might make Charles look weak or indecisive. The monarchy needs to project stability, especially during times of change. The two women sat in thoughtful silence for several minutes, both grappling with a situation that had no clear precedent or easy resolution. Finally, Camilla spoke again. Perhaps there's another way to approach this. What if we turn this crisis into an opportunity to show the public how the royal family can evolve while maintaining its core values? Catherine looked up with interest. What do you mean? I mean, we work together to redefine what this shared title could represent, Camilla explained, her voice gaining strength as the idea developed. Instead of seeing it as competition or division, we could demonstrate how different generations can collaborate to serve the crown more effectively. You bring fresh perspectives and connections to younger demographics. I bring experience and established relationships with traditional supporters. The idea was intriguing, but Catherine worried about the practical implications. But how would that work in terms of precedence and official duties? The protocols for royal hierarchy are so established. Camilla smiled for the first time since the crisis began. My dear, protocols have been adapted throughout history when circumstances required it. What matters most is that we present a united front and show the public that this family can handle challenges with maturity and grace. As their conversation continued, both women began to see possibilities they hadn't considered before. They discussed how they might coordinate their charitable work, support each other's initiatives, and present themselves as complementary rather than competing forces within the royal family. There's something else we need to address, Catherine said as their meeting drew toward a close. The king needs to understand that making major decisions without consulting the family creates unnecessary chaos. This could have been handled so much better with proper communication. Camilla nodded emphatically. Charles has always been impulsive when he believes he's doing something positive. It's one of his most endearing and most frustrating qualities. Someone needs to help him understand the importance of including us in decisions that affect our roles. Both women realized they had discovered an unexpected common ground in their shared experience of managing King Charles's well-intentioned but sometimes poorly executed plans. This shared understanding created a bond that could potentially strengthen rather than weaken the royal family's unity. As Catherine prepared to leave, Camilla stood and embraced her warmly. Thank you for coming today and for speaking so honestly. I think we may have found a way to turn Charles's surprise into something positive for all of us. 1 week later, Buckingham Palace issued a carefully crafted statement that surprised royal watchers around the world. Instead of retracting the controversial title or maintaining the awkward status quo, the royal family had chosen a third path that demonstrated remarkable diplomatic skill and family unity. The statement announced that Queen Camilla and Catherine would jointly launch a new initiative called the Cornwall Partnership, which would coordinate their charitable work and maximize their combined impact on causes close to both their hearts. Rather than competing for the same title, They would use it as a foundation for collaboration that showcased both tradition and innovation within the modern monarchy. King Charles stood at the podium in the palace's grand reception room, flanked by both women, as he addressed a carefully selected group of journalists and photographers. His relief was evident as he spoke about how proud he was of his wife and daughter-in-law for finding a creative solution to what had initially seemed like an impossible situation. The Duchess of Cornwall title has a rich history of service to the British people, the king declared, his voice strong and confident. Today, we expand that tradition by having two remarkable women share this honor, each bringing their unique strengths to serve our nation more effectively than either could alone. Queen Camilla, wearing her favorite sapphire blue suit and the Duchess of Cornwall brooch that had belonged to the late Queen Mother, spoke next. Her words were carefully chosen but came from the heart. Catherine and I have discovered that we share not just a title, but a deep commitment to making a positive difference in people's lives. This partnership will allow us to combine my experience with her fresh perspective to create something truly special. Catherine, elegant in a navy dress that complemented Camilla's outfit, took the podium with visible emotion. I am honored to work alongside Queen Camilla, whose dedication to service has been an inspiration to me since I joined this family. Together, we hope to show that the monarchy can evolve while honoring its traditions. The media response was overwhelmingly positive. Royal correspondents who had been preparing stories about family rifts and constitutional crises found themselves covering a story of reconciliation and innovation instead. Editorial writers praised the royal family's ability to turn a potential disaster into a demonstration of their relevance for modern Britain. Behind the scenes, the week leading up to this announcement had been filled with intensive planning and delicate negotiations. Prince William had played a crucial role as mediator, helping both his father and stepmother understand Catherine's perspective while supporting his wife through her guilt and uncertainty. The practical details of the Cornwall partnership had been worked out. Through hours of meetings between the two women and their staff, they had identified overlapping interests in education, mental health, and supporting military families, creating a framework that would enhance rather than duplicate their existing work. Sir Edward Thornbury, who had initially been concerned about the king's impulsive announcement, found himself impressed by how the crisis had ultimately strengthened the royal family's position. Sometimes, he confided to a colleague, the most successful outcomes arise from the most challenging circumstances. The public reaction exceeded all expectations. Social media, which had been divided and critical just days earlier, was now filled with praise for the royal family's handling of the situation. Young people particularly responded to the message that tradition and progress could coexist, while older royal supporters appreciated that Queen Camilla's contributions had been honored rather than diminished. At a private dinner 3 days after the announcement, the extended royal family gathered to celebrate what many were calling a diplomatic triumph. Prince William raised his glass in a toast to his wife and stepmother, praising their wisdom and grace under pressure. King Charles, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks, acknowledged that his initial approach had been flawed, but expressed gratitude for how it had ultimately brought the family closer together. Queen Camilla and Catherine found themselves seated next to each other, chatting easily about their plans for the partnership's first joint engagement. What had begun as a crisis had evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared purpose. "You know," Camilla said quietly to Catherine as the evening wound down, "I think Charles's terrible timing might have been exactly what we all needed. Sometimes it takes a shock to make us realize what really matters." Catherine smiled, raising her glass in a private toast to unexpected opportunities and finding family in the most surprising places. The Cornwall partnership would go on to become one of the most successful royal initiatives in recent years, demonstrating that the monarchy could adapt to modern challenges while maintaining its essential character. More importantly, it showed that even the most prominent families could work through their differences with honesty, respect, and a willingness to find common ground. King Charles, reflecting on the events weeks later, realized that his impulsive decision had taught him valuable lessons about consultation and communication. But he also took pride in the fact that his instinct to honor Catherine had ultimately led to something far greater than any individual title. It had created a new model for how the royal family could serve Britain In the 21st century, the palace, which had been filled with tension and uncertainty just days earlier, now hummed with the energy of new possibilities. The crisis that had threatened to divide the royal family had instead shown their strength, resilience, and ability to turn challenges into triumphs.